Welcome to Houston Sports Talk with your host, Robert Land.
Thanks for checking into the best Houston sports podcast, part of the National Bleav Network. And we have got some fun stuff to talk about in this one, because back with me is one of our Rockets analysts, one of our favorites, a co-host of the NBA Draft podcast, Upside Swings, Cooper Klein. And we are going to hit the fallout of the KD trade, but much more in this one. And Cooper, you haven't put your 2 cents in on the KD trade. Has reality hit you yet?
No, no, it hasn't. I still I can't believe that we traded for a top 10 player in the NBA. I mean, maybe that's a little rich. Maybe he's 12, 15, but at the end of the day, I mean, what have we been complaining about for the last year? Like, we don't have that go-to scorer. We need this guy who can get a bucket when the offense slows down. You know, if you're not going to get super creative with the offensive sets we run, you just need a guy who can get you a bucket in a pinch. And like down the stretch of games, sometimes we found ways to clutch it out with all that grit, you know, Amen Thompson, and just hustle plays. But most of the time we just needed a bucket, and we didn't have a guy to do that. We got the very best scorer in NBA history to fill that void. Pick whatever nits you want. You can think whatever you want about KD and his career and all this stuff, but we replaced two pretty inefficient scorers. That's a nice way to describe Jalen Green. And honestly, Dillon Brooks' offense, in my opinion, was better for us, was more important than his defense this season. And I think that replacing his shooting with Kevin Durant's is just so much better. I think he adds so much more spacing as an off-ball player. He's a quicker decision maker. He can actually pass the ball. And then that also gives you more space to then bring Jabari into the starting lineup and really see what you have with him. You know, I do think that having him and Amen in the starting lineup was always the way to go. You keep your rebounding advantage, you keep your size advantage, you keep your hustle advantage, and you still have a perfectly spaced floor. You know, you can't leave Jabari open. He's an insane knockdown open shooter. He still struggles with, you know, contested stuff and off the dribble stuff and some of his decision making as a shooter, but he can hit the open ones. And if you have to send two guys at Sengun, you have to worry about Amen as a cutter. And then you also have Kevin Durant and Fred VanVleet out there. Jabari is the perfect outlet to just capitalize on that. And I really think he's going to have a great season because of Kevin Durant's impact. Having somebody who really has to be guarded in a real way.
You need to hold that thought, because we were going to get into all these areas, all these angles that you're talking about right now.
I'm getting too excited. I apologize.
We're coming back to Jabari. I promise. We're coming back to that. I hope you've got some more gems on how this is going to work. But before we get into that, we're recording this on Saturday afternoon, so keep that in mind. I say that because ESPN Shams Charania has said that the Rockets are dangling Cam Whitmore for potential deals for a veteran wing who could replace Dillon Brooks. That's Shams' words. How do you feel about that, Coop? Because Cam Whitmore, a lot of fans are excited because he finally gets his chance to shine now that Jalen's out of the way.
I do really worry about Cam. I do really worry that, you know, we've talked about his lack of feel for the game, and it just doesn't seem like he's improved that much over 2 full seasons. Last year, yeah, he had the perfect chance with some of the injury stuff we had in the midway point of the season. We had such a need for a bench scorer to come in, and he was so bad defensively and so bad at passing the ball that he couldn't even fill that role in regular season games. Unless he was like super hot from 3, I don't think that he was really worth playing. I haven't seen anything that really makes me hopeful that, oh, he could change in year 3. He's magically going to, you know, change in year 3. Because even though he's only going to be 21, at 21, you're really relying on a physical development, right? That's really what comes around for most guys at 21. And Cam's already physically developed. I don't need Cam Whitmore to get stronger. I don't need Cam Whitmore to get faster. He's strong, he's fast, he's explosive, he's bouncy, he's everything you could want in a scoring guard. I need his brain to just lock in and figure out this stuff out. I just don't see it personally. I get the reasons for optimism. It's not for me. So I would like to see him traded. I think if he has one more season where he can't crack the rotation, he's just kind of done in the league. And I think he deserves a fair shot. And he doesn't really fit what Ime wants to do. He doesn't really fit what we need, really, because he can't play off the ball very effectively right now because he can't catch and shoot. He's not a great cutter at the moment. His timing's really bad. He's a good cutter in the sense that when he does cut, he can usually just make it work. But he doesn't have a feel for when to cut, where to cut, what kinds of cuts to do. And he can sometimes really mess up the spacing with that kind of stuff. So I do really worry about those kinds of things. And I think that he deserves a fair shot. And we really need just another wing to come in and play off the ball and maybe have a little bit of creation chops, but mostly just shoot spot ups, defend, cut all right, and maybe add some rebounding.
Yeah, it's a really key time because, in 2 years, he hits restricted free agency. So you have to make that decision on Cam. So the Rockets basically, this is the point in time where you're either going to hope that he makes that jump or you got to get rid of him and try to get something worthy back. And now you're a little bit more all in, not totally all in, obviously, because they didn't give away the assets, but a little bit more all in because KD's only got a couple, 3 years maybe. And the thing about Cam that I don't like so far is not the fact that the IQ isn't where you need it to be. It's just we haven't seen it angling upwards. We haven't seen an incline to it. And that was a lot of what I was seeing with Jalen. I was like, where is the incline? Where are we starting to see him figure some? You don't have to see it all at once, but you could see those many little jumps that somebody like Cam would make. And, I don't think he's going to be out of the league quickly because I think teams are going to try to give him a chance because the physical skills are out of this world. And maybe he figures it out. But I don't think this is somebody that's going to figure some stuff out in 2 or 3 or 4 years. I think this is a longer play for if and when Cam figures it out. I think it's going to take him maybe by year 6 or year 7 or something like that. And maybe he's going to have to bounce from team to team a little bit, Coop.
Yeah, and that's not really the point where we need to be at, right? Guys like that just don't have the time to develop properly in the league in general, but especially not on a team like ours, where we need to be properly optimizing all of our roster spots and all of our, salary chunks. We can't just give away one of our 15, salary spots to Cam Whitmore, who is probably just going to ride the bench anyways. You at least need to take a chance on somebody who you think can actually play, even in just the regular season. That was obviously different players and obviously different situations, but there were some fans who complained about when we had Boban Marjanovic on the team because he's a waste of a roster spot and he's not going to play real minutes. But Boban can give you 10 to 15 spot minutes in certain matchups, right? And that's a good player. Against certain players, he's really good. He's a great bum slayer. If a team is injured, you can throw Boban in and they don't know how to guard him. And he's a little change of pace. And that is fine. For a 10th to 15th man to be able to give you 10 to 15 legitimately good minutes is important. And to me, I just don't see a world where Cam, there are even really any matchups where if he's not hitting threes, he's a good fit. Especially because even when the shot's falling, he just gives up free buckets on the other end like it's no tomorrow. And there's just no effort to even improve. I can't see them sticking with that guy. Maybe they do just because they don't think they're going to get requisite value, but I don't see him being on the team by the end of the season. I bet he gets traded at the trade deadline if he doesn't go now.
The other part about this is Jock Landale. We're doing this Saturday. On Sunday, Jock Landale, they have to decide whether they are going to give him that $8 million. And that $8 million that you have with Landale is what you're probably going to combine with Cam Smith's numbers to get a player that's probably in the 12, 13, 14, $15 million range, somewhere in there. The thing that I noticed already is a couple of Rockets potential targets off the board. I'm not saying this is what you would give up for somebody like Cam, but the Cavs have traded for Lonzo Ball. That's a guy that we mentioned before. They re-signed Sam Merrill. That's somebody else that maybe you could have targeted around that money, I guess. And then also Another guy that I've thought about, and this guy might be more in play now, is with the signing of Naz Reid to 5 years, $125 million. I just don't know if Nickeil Alexander-Walker is going to be for somebody that the T-Wolves can afford. So that's a guy you could use those two contracts and do like this and do a sign-in trade. But if they don't want to spend money, that's the problem. If they don't want to spend the money, then on something similar, then I don't know if the T-Wolves. So that's a tough thing about like that potential guy with the T-Wolves. And that's the tricky thing about this. It's like somebody, it's going to have to be a team that is like, we just want a shot at seeing what we could do with Cam, and we can't use this guy. And, it's probably a potential lottery team or something. It's not somebody that's like a real contender where you're going to get back a piece. And I was going through those, and unless you can convince the really off the rails, strange Pelicans to give up Herb Jones, which maybe you can, because, they've got a couple of wizards in charge over there that you don't want to have running your team. But Cooper, I mean, that's the thing. I'm looking at guys to get, and it's really difficult for me to find the guy that maybe the Rockets are looking for in this situation.
Yeah, I mean, there's like Terrence Mann, who just got salary dumped to the Nets. But is that a guy who he's played in playoff games. He's pretty tough. I could see him being a guy they're gunning for.
Coby White is a name that I've heard. Will you consider him more a two or I'd love to get Coby White. Would you consider him more of a two or a one, or what position do you think is ideal for him?
I think he's more of a two. Maybe I wouldn't say undersized two, but he's not a big two by any means. He's not really a wing, right? He is more of a scorer, which isn't the end of the world. We do need more guys who can go out there, get you a bucket, actually hit their shots. And I think Coby White can do that. And he's making basically functionally nothing. Maybe like a guy like DiVincenzo, if the Wolves want to trade him to bring back Nickeil Alexander-Walker.
Yeah, that money is still like that's a lot for what you're trying to do. And here's the thing with it, Cooper. I mean, you're trying to maybe stay under the first apron or at it. You don't want to get into the first apron, I think, if you're the Rockets. Well, I would think they wouldn't. And they just announced they're bringing back the Stay Ready crew, Jae'Sean, Jeff Green, and Aaron Holiday. No word on the numbers yet, but Holiday's option is getting reworked. So I assume it's cheaper than the $5 million he would have made. And this matters, Coop, because that's 3 cheap vets. And I think that's another way for them to stay in that area where you're not into that first apron. It starts not to get punitive yet for the Rockets.
And as much as I want to be like, well, I don't really care whose money it is, just spend the money. Getting past those aprons, especially before you have to pay Amen. You're not even paying Tari or Jabari money, like real money yet. There could be another trade down the line. You could get another all-star and then still have Sengun's money on the books, still have Amen, have one of Tari or Jabari. Reed doesn't have an extension. We'll see if Reed, is good enough to deserve one down the line. But like, you still haven't paid any of these guys, and you probably want to stay under to avoid the cumulative effects of the different aprons, all that stuff. I don't know all the exact stuff, but I know it's bad, and I know it'll eat you alive.
And this gets to VanVleet. What did you think about the new VanVleet contract? It's 24 this year. $26 million player option the following year. I'm not a big fan of player options typically. It's less than the $30 million that I thought was a little bit of an overpay. But Coop, it's a little more than the low 20s, which I Bleav was kind of his market value. I bring this all up because this is very important, because every few million matter when you're talking about these aprons and all the guys that you're talking about that are gonna be up for extensions here in a year, like Tari and Jabari.
I find it hard to care as much because it ends right before Amen's extension would kick in, right? And I think that what you're doing is you're basically using that to rent out that cap space. And then next year, not this season, but next season, he'll be an expiring. And then you can trade him, or you can even advertise him as an expiring this season because of the player option. And it makes him a lot easier to trade if it is a player option, because if he hates it there, he can still deny the player option and go get pretty good money elsewhere. Like, there's so much flexibility on that deal, and it's such a short deal. And as long as you're able to still find a way to maneuver under that first apron and stay competitive without just like, if you want to go blow it all up and get a ton of all-stars and, do whatever, then go for it. But I like it. I think Fred is really good, and I think he'll be far better when he's able to shift more off ball, right? When you don't have to throw the ball to him and just let him take whatever shot he wants because there's 6 seconds left in the shot clock and, we got stymied on 3 different bad drives. Now we have KD to take those shots. So it doesn't matter. Fred can space the floor, run a pick and roll every once in a while, and make good kickouts to a guy like Kevin Durant, to guys like Jabari. And I think simplifying his life will bring more of the good out of his game and hopefully make him more efficient this season.
We're going to get back to KD in just a little bit, but I mentioned the fact that this could be a Landale Cam Whitmore double in this deal. Well, that's interesting because that would, a 2-for-1 would leave you a roster spot. I heard somebody throw out the name Eric Gordon that was in the know. Keep that guy in mind as some veteran that they might be able to sign cheaply and bring back the old EG for the Rockets fans. But in just a second, I do want to ask you about the KD effect and what it's going to mean to a couple of the Rockets players. But before we get there, just a quick reminder for our listeners. Are you guys willing to trade Whitmore? Who would you want for them? And what would the contract look like? Just let me know in the YouTube comments. On Monday's show, ex-Texan wide receiver Cecil Shorts joins me. And I have a former Astro great in a few days. So I can't wait for those two. As always, you can support us and get updates on every show we drop by subscribing on YouTube and your favorite podcast app. Hit us with a quick thumbs up too. And if you want more content, I just need you to subscribe and I need you to comment, guys. It just helps. It helps me. It makes me want to do more of this stuff. You have no idea how much that helps. All right, Coop, how does the subtraction of Jalen and the addition of KD affect Sengun? Let's start with him. My first thought isn't KD less of a pick and roll player than Jalen? Is primary offense initiation different now for Sengun?
I think KD is a different kind of player, but one who is far better at coming off of DHOs, which is a way that Sengun is also really great, initiating dribble handoffs, doing a little dish it to KD. And KD's just a far better reader of the floor. When he sees the kind of pressure Jalen saw ever, he can actually make passes to a rolling Sengun, to cutters, to the open shooter. I mean, he's a very, very good passer these days. He's really evolved that part of his game over the last few seasons. And, this is a guy who can really thrive on or off the ball, right? He knows how to move. He knows how to cut. He knows how to reposition as a shooter. Like, he doesn't just stand still when he doesn't have the ball in his hands. Really being able to, space the floor for Sengun, make sure he's not seeing 3 bodies in the paint every single time he drives, but then also just force defenses to stay honest in a very real way. I mean, obviously, but I do think he can play out of the pick and roll as well. If Sengun goes up, sets a hard pick, if KD handles that properly and a team messes up their pick and roll coverage, that's maybe the deadliest pick and roll in the league. Is that a stretch? They're not traditional in any way, but that almost makes it less guardable. If you are putting a guy like Rudy Gobert into the Sengun Kevin Durant pick and roll, 2 guys Kevin Durant who can score at all 3 levels, hyper efficient, absurdly efficient at every single level of the floor, or Sengun who can hit his little pop shot, who can hit his little fadeaway, who can take you into the post and body you. How do you guard that? An honest defense, I just don't think can guard those guys. You add in a guy like Amen cutting and cleaning up baskets, cutting into, if you send Amen's defender, he's cutting and he's wide open. And those are 2 guys who can find him and set him up for easy dunks and easy layups and easy putbacks. And this team makes so much more sense when you put a guy like Kevin Durant in there who can really draw the attention of a defense and punish them. You cannot guard him honestly. And then you also have a guy like Sengun who cannot be guarded honestly because he demands a double. every single time he touches the ball. Like, obviously, it'll be kind of weird. It'll take time to figure out. But I do really think that this is going to be an unstoppable duo pretty soon.
How do you guys think? How do you listeners think about how it's going to affect Sengun? Let me know in the comments. Excellent points, Cooper, as always. And we have no idea if Jabari or Tari is going to be the one starting. The educated guess is Jabari. So how does KD and the absence of Dillon, since that's got to be brought up at this point, change Jabari? Isn't he more involved now in the offense? And how does his role change, Cooper?
I think that we'll see him more as a screener in a real pick and pop way. Ime was on, if I'm not mistaken, he was on that Brooklyn staff when KD was there, right? And Brooklyn was just so good at getting super creative with how they got Kevin Durant moving. If you are playing, the assumed starting five, Fred, Amen, KD, Jabari, Sengun, you have 4 guys who are north of 6'7", right? And you have 3 guys who are nearly 7 feet tall. What other team has 3 guys that big who can switch from Kevin Durant to Jabari? Or if you add Jabari as the screener and they stick their 2 guard off in the corner on Jabari and he gets involved in the action, suddenly you have Kevin Durant attacking downhill against some guy who's 6'3" and can barely get his hands up to Kevin Durant's armpits. Right. Like there's so many fun things you can do that I actually, I've criticized Ime a lot for his lack of creativity on offense, but this is very much within his wheelhouse. We've seen that he really likes to just figure out new and fun ways to punish switches. Right. And
Yes.
Force mismatches. And I think that having these 3-4 guys who can all punish a mismatch is so easy and so obvious. And I'm really excited. I think Jabari will be able to get back to cleaning up on the offensive boards. Having a guy like Kevin Durant who can really teach him how to play off ball and move off ball could be really great. I'm really excited because this is the chance for Jabari to really develop into how he's going to add value in the NBA moving forward, because he's not going to be that star. Right. We drafted him at 3. Some people thought he was going to be, the next Kevin Durant. Some of that was kind of silly, but there's always some assumption of him adding some star level offensive value. I just don't think that's there anymore. But this is the path forward for him, being this elite off ball player who can really play off of great players and benefit from their gravity. And this could be, what the rest of Jabari's career looks like. Great rebounding, great cutting, great finishing, great shooting. Just perfect role player in a starting lineup.
I typically don't make too much of this, but, having KD in the locker room with Jabari going through stuff, because he's not the next Kevin Durant, but at least Jabari has got somebody that's his body type, his shot selection. He likes the mid-range jumper like KD. He likes 3-point shots like KD. He's not a guy that wants to dribble past everybody and finish, especially KD at this point of his career. Very similar in that way. And then, you look at Jabari and what he was able to do in the playoffs. And I think that's more of the Jabari that we're going to see. I think the shooting is about to take that leap. I don't think it was an accident, the numbers he put up in the playoffs. I mean, his 3-point numbers were outstanding towards the end of the season. They were outstanding in the playoffs. And now you add Kevin Durant with the gravity that he has and the chance that Jabari is going to have to actually shoot the ball. He doesn't have Dillon Brooks, just dribbling in the post. He doesn't have, the Dillon Brooks shots that are going to get in his way. I just think he's got a lot more opportunities now with KD. And there's going to be a lot of chance with KD off the floor, because I think they're going to have to sort of be careful about his minutes, Cooper. And that'll give some of these guys a chance to show what they can do when KD isn't on the floor, because you want to play it safe with him. He's older and he's got a lot of minutes on him. He tends to miss games. So these guys have got a legit shot now.
Yeah, that's a good point. Having a guy like Jabari who is not super injury prone, I think that they're going to want to load manage to some degree Kevin Durant, because you want to just get him ramped up all season, make sure that he's all good and healthy and just ready to go for the playoffs, because that's when you need him most. Obviously, you want him for all the regular season. You want to win as many regular season games as you can. We've seen these guys can win regular season games. We know these guys are good in the regular season. And I don't think it was like some Kings 3rd seed flukiness, right, that led them to the 2 seed. It's legitimately just offensive rebounding and effort, defensive intensity. If you can keep that up for a whole season, that'll get you a high seed, right? That'll win you more games than it'll lose you. You have the opportunity to really make sure Kevin is fully right. His body's all right. Everybody else still gets their chance to shine, right? Like you think Jabari's going to be the 5th starter offensively, and it's going to be kind of hard. And then there's going to be games where he's going to play 40 minutes because Kevin Durant's going to be taking the second night of a back-to-back off, and he's just going to be the focal point. And it's like, Jabari, we just need you to go get us some mid-range shots. Go sit in the mid-range. We're not going to lean on, Dillon Brooks chucking 15 short twos. Let's let you get some jumpers in. Everybody still gets to play their game in a really important way. And I think that's really important mentally for the long grind of the season and then into the extra 20, 25 games in the postseason. If you want to go all the way, like these guys have to be feeling good, and they'll get the chance to next to Kevin Durant.
The last guy I want to ask about, how does the Durant addition and, of course, the Jalen subtraction affect Amen? Because Amen, I'll start off by pointing out, should be bringing the ball up more without Jalen. That's one. And Coop, that affects how quickly they get into initial actions because Fred and Jalen were much slower bringing the ball up the floor. That's all there is to it.
Yeah, Amen always pushes the pace. When he did, grab and go, even in semi-transition, when there would be a miss and then it would be like, it's just one of those, the defense is already back or they're getting set. Amen still, his walk is so much faster than Jalen's walk, right? But even then, he's almost never just like walking up the floor. He's jogging everywhere. He's running. He's pushing the pace. He's making sure guys get the ball. He's making sure guys get rewarded for running in transition. And that's important, especially because you have a guy like Jabari who can fill the corners, can be the trailer in transition. You have a guy like Tari who's always just going to head of steam down in transition. You'll have Kevin Durant trailing the break. And, you have all these guys who can really play in transition, in semi-transition even. I think that there was a really missed opportunity this season to just let these guys kind of play slightly faster at times. Instead of taking 6 or 7 seconds to get up the court, let's take 4. Those 2-3 extra seconds could be the difference between a made and a missed shot. Just let them play a little faster, push them to be a tiny bit. I'm not saying go full 7 seconds or less, but there's always room when you have some of the best athletes on the planet to play faster. So you have a guy in Kevin Durant who can actually help around the rim. I think that's one of my biggest complaints about Dillon and Jalen over the last season or two is these are two guys who are 6'5", 6'6", decent athletes. They're strong. They have good hands, and they just do not help as the low man around the rim. If they don't care or they're too slow at processing to help. And these are guys who could be blocking like a shot a game, even like a shot and a half with how much they were dragged to the corners and forced to be the low man. And they just didn't care. And then now you have a guy in Kevin Durant. You have 3 guys who are all, elite secondary rim protectors in Amen, Jabari, KD. And then you have Sengun, who's one of the better center defenders in basketball. And then you have Tari coming off the bench. So you'll have some of the best rim protection in basketball. You keep your rebounding advantage. You keep your effort advantage. And you allow Amen to more play his game and not force him into this slower point guard style that he doesn't not really his game right now.
Before you get out of here, we got to talk about the draft. We got to go to your expertise, and you can follow him at Alley_oop_Coop on X. That's Alley_oop_Coop on X. His podcast, Upside Swings, focuses specifically on the draft. Go check that out. And I got to ask this one right off the top, Coop. The Rockets, they signed 6'7" Mississippi State forward Cam Matthews. What can you tell us, Coop? My main issue is here's yet another guy who can't shoot. And I mean, when I say he can't shoot, in 5 seasons, 20% from 3 for his career and 55% for his career from the free throw line. Ugh.
To me, there's 2 kinds of two-way contracts, right? There's developmental guys who you actually care about, but they need G League time, and you really think that they could get there one day. And then there's guys who are just so tough. Like, these are guys who will withstand the test of being dragged up to the NBA immediately after playing a G League game. And then they go from flying in a private jet to the next morning, they hop on the team bus, and then they're driving halfway across the country in the G League, and they're not getting paid very much, but they're doing it all because they care so much, and they are so tough, right? And that's Cam Matthews. Cam Matthews is tough. He's an elite rebounding wing, especially on the offensive end. He grabs a ton of offensive rebounds, always has. He's a free throw drawer. Like you said, he's not a free throw hitter, but he can get to the free throw line because he slashes hard to the basket, right? So he makes the other team foul, and he dunks the ball a lot for a 6'7", pretty good athlete. And he's got pretty good hands, right? Defensively, he can get in passing lanes. He can bother offensive players. I think that this is a guy who could legitimately give you like 10 minutes in a regular season game. You know, just get out there, try hard, make things happen for us on that end. And I think that's Cam Matthews. The quick way to describe him is he's Nate Hinton. If Nate Hinton was 3-4 inches taller, I think that's a good player. That's a good bet to take. You know, if I had scouted him, I think I would have had him in my late second. I just didn't really scout as many guys as I should have this year. I got to 70 guys, and I was like, I am not watching the dregs of this class to find two guys who I kind of like. But going back and watching him after the draft, he's pretty fun.
To be fair to you, it's really hard now because so many guys jump out at the last second because of the NIL deals. So you can't get everybody, even if you got 100 guys sometimes, because you lose so many of them with the NIL. So now you're talking even further behind. This is an undrafted guy that probably, if those guys stayed in the NIL, maybe he is around 100 or something, you know, in that vicinity. I wanted to ask you also, what team had your favorite draft, or maybe your best draft, you could call it, outside of the team who fell backwards into Cooper Flag?
Sneaky, I really liked the Hornets draft. I thought that they had a decent one. I really like Concaniple. I don't like McNeely very much. I'm not a big fan of his. He's a shooter who can't shoot. Maybe he's got some funk to him, but I don't really like him. And then getting Zion James, Duke's, point guard, consummate point guard. I love that. I think Zion James is like the perfect guard to play next to LaMelo, Brandon Miller, and Concaniple, right? You can kind of play the four, right? And he really is going to be able to manipulate the opposing defenses.
Is he like I've heard he's the sort of 1B cheap version of Alex Caruso because he's got the defense. He's a really smart guy. I've heard he's maybe a future coach too.
Yeah, he's really smart is the thing. To me, he's like Bruce Brown light, right? Where he's a guy who can get downhill, can play as a roller. He'll set screens. He'll keep the ball moving. He will shoot the ball, but he's not like a great shooter, but he can hit open ones. He just knows how to play, right? And the Hornets, what they desperately need more than anything is guys who can show up and just play basketball at an okay level. And then they also got Ryan Kalkbrenner, who's like not my favorite, but a good defensive center bet. And they haven't had a good defensive center since like Bismack Biyombo. And does he count as like a good defensive center?
Is he their starter with Mark Williams gone now?
I think they're going to start Diabate. If I had to guess, they're going to start Moussa Diabate. But if Kalkbrenner really hits in summer league and camps, he could be the starter. But I think part of what helps them make the Mark Williams deal is Diabate was averaging like 12 rebounds a game, for them before he got hurt. They're pretty excited about him from what I understand. And having a guy who can just rebound all your team's misses when all you do is shoot threes is pretty cool. So I really like their draft. I really like the Lakers draft. I know they only really got Adu Thiero. Everybody wanted him to take a center. And I think that was really kind of silly to some degree. Expecting a rookie center to come in and immediately start next to LeBron and Luka and be good was kind of dumb. I think it was always kind of dumb. Getting a guy in Thiero who's a little older, elite secondary rim protector, great slasher, kind of a star bet too. If he doesn't really fit with what you want to do long-term, he'll still retain value. But I think there's a real chance he's like TJ Warren with rim protection, before TJ Warren's body exploded. So I really liked that draft. and I really liked Utah's draft. I'm not a big fan of Ace Bailey, but their second round was great work. I really like John Tonji. Adding Clayton, adding John Tonji, two guys who are like actually tough at the guard position, kind of iron sharpens iron type thing, I think is going to be really, really cool. So, and then you get Ace Bailey, who like has the talent, even if I'm not the biggest fan of his personally. Just like a good draft.
Vernon Maxwell does not endorse any Jazz love. So the least favorite I was going to ask you, who's your least favorite draft? It's much easier to say, who do you hate more, the Pelicans or the Nets after this draft?
The Nets, the Pelicans got Queen, and Queen's my guy, but it actually like had me upset on our live show that we did that the Pelicans drafted Queen because they are a nightmare. You know, obviously,
and he fits terribly. He's
awful. It's awful. Like what? So I think there's some really cool stuff there. If you just think about the Pelicans as Trey Murphy, Herb Jones, Derek Queen, that's so cool. There's like, that's the perfect front court to surround Queen with. And then it's like, oh, well, they have Zion, they have Jordan Poole, they have DeJounte Murray, they have all these guys who just stink. and it's so easy to just get so down on them. But the Nets draft is, in my opinion, the worst I've ever seen. Actually, the worst process I've seen in a while. Like, obviously, I'm super low on Demon. I'm super low on Traore. Like, obviously, if I'm low on those guys, I'm not going to like their draft. But I think that the approach of just being like, let's take four guys who kind of work as primary creator bets and just pray one of them hits, and none of them can shoot. Powell is like the guy who can maybe shoot, and he had a tiny usage for a bad North Carolina team and didn't even really shoot it that well.
I heard it was the least usage of any player, and I don't know, like the last 15 or like since they started clocking it, it's the least usage of a guy that was drafted in the first round.
It is second least, because the least is Derek Lively. But Lively doesn't really count because he only played half the season, right? So of guys who like actually played, he has the lowest. He wasn't actually also the lowest in this draft. That was actually Jemai Mashak, who got drafted in the later second. I just really struggle to see any of those guys like fitting together. I think that the bet is like, you put enough good playmakers next to each other and like you'll be able to play this motion offense and it's really cool, but all of them suck at connective passing. Nolan Traore is the like most selfish passer I've ever seen watching players play. He's one of the worst point guard prospects I've seen because his process is just awful. Demon can't pass unless he's standing still and just staring down a pass like this for 10 seconds. The process there is just so flawed. And I'm happy because we have their pick swap or whatever in a few years, and they will almost assuredly suck after that draft. But to have 5 picks and take 4 swings at effectively the same guy, just awful process. So I'm glad that's not us.
Yeah, it's not been a good few years for Sean Marks, and amazing that he still has the job. Amazing that anybody is hiring Troy Weaver to do anything in the organization at this point. As you know, it has, as everybody has said, it's got his footprints and handprints all over some of the moves that the Pelicans made. I know Dumars is in charge. He hasn't done any better over the years. And that's a whole other thing to get into, but I figured, let's get back to the Rockets for just a second. They didn't have a draft pick this year, but I thought, hey, why not play back my favorite Rockets draft moment? Let's go back to the best Rockets draft moment ever. Come on, 41 years ago, this one.
The Houston Rockets, who are represented here by owner Charlie Thomas and his daughter Tracy, select Hakeem Olajuwon of the University of Houston.
It is official. The well-attired Hakeem Olajuwon, who started playing basketball just 5 years ago from Nigeria, is now the #1 pick. He does not have to go too far. From the University of Houston, will now be playing, incredibly, alongside of Ralph Sampson for the Houston Rockets. Hakeem, whose family owns a cement business in Nigeria, and Hakeem is certainly laying the foundation here in the United States.
And here he is. Here's the man, the #1 choice of the NBA draft, Hakeem the Dream Olajuwon. This is a big day for you, young man.
Oh, yes. I'm just very happy. I think this is the best thing can ever happen to me.
Hakeem was just telling me that he and his mom and dad have just flown here the last couple of days from Nigeria. So you got the whole family in on this one.
Oh, yes. I just want them to see what's going on in the United States.
Well, this has become, Houston that is, has become kind of a second home for you. I mean, you must feel comfortable knowing that you're going back to a place where people know you and you've got a lot of friends.
I think I'm just very lucky to stay in Houston. That's the best thing can ever happen to me.
Hakeem, tell me a little bit about some of the experiences you've had in playing against NBA players. I know in the past, during the summers, you've had a chance to go head-to-head with Moses Malone. Quite an experience.
Oh, yes. Moses Malone is a very big player, and he's very physical. I think I'm not to be competing with all these players.
I think that perhaps you're a pretty big guy yourself, and maybe you can be able to dish out a little of the same.
Oh, yes. I mean, just keep trying.
How about a Moses Malone? Has he taken you under his wing a little bit and tried to show you some of the ins and outs of the game?
He's just trying to tell me what's going on in the NBA and how to come up. I think he's a very good friend of mine.
Boy, and the rest they say is history. And, the Moses stuff, if you go look, we did a little appreciation of Moses. It's in the YouTube library. Look for that, because I talked with Robert Falkoff, who covered him at the time, about Moses' effect on Hakeem and working with him and that sort of thing. And I don't know what you think of as you look at that right now, Cooper, but one of the things that I love is he said, I'm lucky to stay in Houston. I was lucky to stay in Houston. This was a kid that was at that time new. He was excited. He wanted to be here. You had a guy that was, from Houston and all that. And hell, he still looks good. The black tux doesn't get old, man. He still looks sharp.
Yeah, I was going to say, I spend a lot of time on draft day talking about suits. I love formal wear like that, kind of one of my nerd things. And he looks great. One of the best draft fits of all time. He has all the details down with the collar, the super, super formal collar with the bow tie. You don't see very many guys rock the bow tie anymore. I love it. I think it just looks great. After seeing, guys wearing shorts, jackets that are too tight and no undershirt, which I think is fun. I'm all for having fun, but it's a nice change of pace to see just a truly well-dressed man.
There was actually, they mentioned Ralph. It was actually 42 years ago, as we're recording this tonight, that the Rockets drafted Ralph Sampson. It was this date, 1983, June the 28th. So, just so much fun looking back at that and seeing Hakeem and, young Hakeem. And we had no idea what we were about to experience, but man, was it exciting. You just can't imagine the excitement from Houston that time. I know a lot of you people that are watching and listening to us right now, you're too young to remember this, but just imagine this guy that you got to see with the Cougars for 3 years or 4 years, taking him to the Final Four the last 3 seasons. And you get the first pick and you get to pick this guy. And, I've said it before, I'll say it again. There's not one Houstonian, not one. You cannot find a Houstonian. You cannot find a Rockets fan that ever says, yeah, but, Jordan was picked third. We should pick Jordan. Nobody says that, because it was Hakeem and he was our guy, and he turned into Hakeem. And, I just can't, I can't say that enough. I get so giddy, Coop, watching that.
I love stuff like that. I've gone back and watched some old Hakeem games and, from the him and Sampson era. But the thing that really strikes me about that, and you describing that, is I'm imagining in 2018 when the Suns drafted DeAndre Ayton, they thought the exact same thing was going to happen. They thought they'd be here being like, well, there's going to be people saying, well, Luka was right there, but we had Ayton. And just it really shows you how special Hakeem is, right? Hakeem as a player is one of the most special players of all time. Incredibly slept on in all-time rankings and all that stuff. Got unlucky to play at the same time as a guy like Jordan and so many other guys, but still left his mark on the game in such an insane way.
Rest in peace, the Portland Trailblazer fan from that era, because they got the worst of the deal. The second pick in that draft, Sam Bowie, the third pick, Michael Jordan. And, Bowie just, he never could get healthy, never could stay healthy, just never was that guy. And, back then it was like, hey, there's a big guy. You got to take the big guy. You got to take the big guy. Mm-hmm. Nowadays, I think there would have been a big argument between Jordan and Bowie. If you looked at this whole situation now, not even knowing the health stuff going on, but just, if you would have argued that now, it'd been, but Jordan, remember the big trivia question was, who was the only who was the only person ever to hold Michael Jordan under 20 points a game for a season? And the answer, Dean Smith, the coach of North Carolina. So he wasn't scoring the points. They're, oh, well, maybe he's not that good of a scorer. That might have been the draft argument back in the day. I don't know, Cooper, but that's what I'm thinking. Maybe people would have been like, well, I don't know. This guy can, we're looking at his jumping out of the gym and all this stuff in the combine, but can he put the ball in the? We don't know if he could put the ball in the basket.
Yeah, there would have been people. I like to think at Upside Swings we would have been like, well, you got to look at the scheme, you got to look at what's going on there. But there would have been people who are like, wow, per 100 possessions, he's only scoring, however many points and blah 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 blah. And it's like, well, have you seen this guy play basketball? That's my big argument these days. It's like, have you watched this guy play? It's like he can play or he can't. And a guy like Jordan could always play. And that was always the argument.
Well, let's do this again soon, man. Always fun.
Yeah.
Kevin Durant is in Houston again. We can say it again.
You're listening to Houston Sports Talk.
Hey, don't forget to support us by subscribing and commenting on YouTube. You can always listen to us on Spotify, Apple, or your favorite podcast app. Tell your friends about us and share our show links on social media. Spread the word, everybody. Thanks for listening.